That's right, the world's largest democracy. Let me just deal with the post-colonial period, the modern times. I mean, the relationship with India, in my view, has gone from being rocky to being really one of our most important bilateral relationships in the world. And when I look at this development in Afghanistan, my view on how important the relationship with India is even greater today, this moment, than it was, a couple months ago. It's clearly a very important bilateral relationship, and good bilateral relationships have to be based on trust and transparency. Now, that said, you leveled some criticisms. I'm going to put a few back on you. We faced in the Cold War period a major threat to geopolitical stability, to freedom, to democracy in the former Soviet Union. And India was very intent on maintaining its non-aligned position on that. I do not believe today that a position of non-alignment between what was, I think, properly described as an evil empire by Ronald Reagan and one of the world's most powerful force of freedom in the world is one anyone can be non-aligned on. So that's kind of where a lot of these issues began. And then, as you're now, I think India's really awakened even more quickly in the United States to the reality of what we face in the CCP. But if you go back to the original recognition that India provided China after the Civil War, I mean, that was a enormously controversial position in the United States too. I mean, the position was, why would you sort of go about recognizing, Mao and this tyrannical regime that we properly were trying to caution the world about at that time, but it was also in a complicated era where ultimately in the 70s, as Nixon and Kissinger both go to Beijing, we realized we needed China a little bit too. So that likely was the mindset, I think, of India at the time. But those were two big issues. Then as it relates to Pakistan, I'm sure we're on the same page on Pakistan. I mean, I've been engaged since the 1980s on Afghanistan issues. And as a result of that, and particularly in the support for Massoud and for the Mujahideen, I mean, just lied to repeatedly. I don't think ever so just completely obviously lied to. I mean, always being told what we want to hear by them, and then predictably never followed up with the promises that they make. So much of the aid that we sent that was designed, to go to the Afghan Mujahideen ends up in the hands of the Arab Mujahideen. This is also now completely misrepresented. The U.S. was not, and I was in these meetings, so I recall it like it was yesterday. We were consciously, acutely aware of bin Laden and easily half a dozen other what I would call Afghan Mujahideen leaders that we were aware were problematic and that we did not want to see empowered militarily. Yet Pakistan, because we relied on the ISI, to their intelligence body, to transport much of this aid into Afghanistan over that mountainous terrain on horseback half the time, they misdirected it. And we were aware it was being misdirected too, and realized some of this was before we had the more refined satellite imaging that we have available to us now. But we were aware of it, and we confront them, and it was not sincere. It was not a sincere issue. And then you got to take into consideration that Pakistan's development as a nuclear power complicates everything.
Yes.
Right. So whenever you want to confront Pakistan on something, and this is why I think the Islamic regime in Iran cannot be allowed to get nuclear weapons, you logically got to say, well, where does this stand in the hierarchy of priorities as it relates to the fact that these guys could launch a nuclear attack in the worst case scenario, or threaten to do so. And that is obviously that always leads to a whole higher level of complex issues. I don't know what we do about Pakistan at this point. I don't like anything that I'm seeing out of them right now in Afghanistan. My position, I'm surprised it's not more broadly held. I think it is broadly held in India. I'm very disappointed in what I'm seeing, not just out of clearly the Biden administration, but even our side, the Republican side right now. Just there's not creative, assertive positions being made on this. And to me, what we should be doing is pretty clear cut. But Pakistan's embrace of the Taliban, the Taliban is Pakistan, Pakistan is the Taliban. I mean, I really don't think there's a whole lot of space between the two. And, obviously, if you, as I'm sure you have, studied the rise of the Taliban and its formation, it's very difficult to even envision that it would have been formed if you hadn't had the exposure that many of them had had in Pakistani extreme religious educational training inside Pakistan. And of course, bin Laden would likely have been captured if he would have been contained to Afghanistan, but he had safe harbor, as much of Al-Qaeda has in Pakistan, and that complicated the war. And it complicated this war too. If the Taliban didn't have safe harbor into Pakistan, I think, you wouldn't have had 50, 60,000 Taliban armed who represented any risk to Kabul as they did. Their ability to seek safe harbor in Pakistan was one of their strongest attributes, almost reminiscent of the Viet Cong used Laos and Cambodia in the Vietnam War.
Right.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.